My mother-in-law tried to sabotage my wedding, so I sabotaged her reputation instead. I should have seen the red flags when Karen insisted on being involved in every single wedding decision from the moment David proposed. "I planned 3 absolutely perfect weddings for my daughters," she'd say with pride, conveniently forgetting that 2 of those marriages ended in messy, expensive divorces within 3 years. The third daughter was already seeing a marriage counselor 6 months in. But David assured me she meant well, and I desperately wanted to start our marriage on good terms with his family. Looking back, the warning signs were there from our very first meeting. Karen had sized me up like competition, not a future daughter-in-law. She'd made comments about how David's previous girlfriends had been more involved in family traditions, and how she hoped I wouldn't be one of those modern brides who thinks they know everything. I'd brushed it off as mother-in-law anxiety, but I should have paid attention. The sabotage started small and seemingly innocent, which is what made it so insidious. She accidentally gave the florist the wrong color scheme, hot pink instead of the soft blush pink I'd specifically chosen after weeks of deliberation. When I called to correct it, the florist sounded genuinely confused. Mrs. Mitchell was very specific about the hot pink roses and carnations. She said the bride had changed her mind overnight and wanted something much more vibrant that would really pop in the wedding photos. I spent 45 minutes on the phone with the florist, explaining that I'd never requested hot pink anything. The florist was mortified. "She seemed so confident and knew all the details of your order. She even mentioned that you were worried the blush would look washed out in photos." I fixed it immediately, spending an extra hour on the phone ensuring they understood the correct colors and confirming my identity with the password I'd set up specifically to prevent mix-ups. But when I confronted Karen about the mix-up later that day, she played completely innocent. "Oh, honey, I could have sworn you mentioned hot pink during our lunch last week. I thought you wanted something that would really stand out and look dramatic for the pictures. I was just trying to help make your vision come to life." The gaslighting was immediate and effective. For a moment, I actually wondered if I had mentioned hot pink somewhere along the way. Then came the caterer incident, which was far more elaborate and expensive. She told them I was vegetarian, which I'm definitely not. I love a good steak and had specifically requested beef tenderloin as one of the main course options. The entire menu got changed without my knowledge to quinoa salads, elaborate tofu steaks, and some kind of weird chickpea pasta dish that cost twice as much as the original menu. When I called the caterer in complete panic, they were sympathetic but firm. "Mrs. Mitchell called yesterday morning," the head chef explained. "She mentioned you'd gotten very health-conscious lately after reading some documentary about factory farming and that you would be absolutely mortified if there was any meat at your wedding. She said you were too embarrassed to mention it yourself because you'd already discussed the beef option, but that you'd been crying about it all week." The story was so detailed and believable that even I almost believed it for a second. Karen had even mentioned specific documentary titles and health statistics, but I knew I'd never said any of that. It took 3 phone calls and a deposit to change everything back to the original menu. When I confronted Karen about this one, she doubled down. "Jessica, honey, I could have sworn David mentioned you'd been talking about going vegetarian. Maybe I misunderstood, but I was just trying to be supportive of your new lifestyle choices." She managed to make me feel like I was the crazy one for being upset about my wedding menu being changed without permission. By the third mistake, I knew this wasn't accidental anymore. She'd given the DJ a completely different playlist, her favorite country songs instead of our carefully curated mix of pop, rock, and romantic ballads that David and I had spent weeks putting together, songs that held special meaning for us, tracks from our first date, our relationship milestones. Dancing Queen and Mr. Brightside were replaced with Friends in Low Places and Achy Breaky Heart. The DJ called me completely bewildered. "Mrs. Mitchell said you'd had a change of heart about the music and wanted something more traditional and family-friendly. She mentioned that your grandmother was very religious and would be offended by some of the modern songs." My grandmother had been dead for 5 years, and she'd loved dancing to pop music. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" David finally confronted her after this third incident. "This is getting ridiculous. Jessica's stressed enough without vendors getting wrong information." Karen immediately burst into crocodile tears, her voice quivering with practiced emotion. "I'm just trying to help make it special for you both. I know how stressful wedding planning can be for young women these days. Your sisters let me plan their weddings completely, and they turned out absolutely beautiful. I thought maybe I could take some pressure off Jessica by handling a few small details. She painted herself as the helpful mother-in-law and me as the stressed-out bridezilla who couldn't handle planning her own wedding. David felt guilty seeing his mother cry and asked me to give her one final chance to help with the wedding. Against every instinct screaming in my head, I agreed, but I wasn't going to be completely stupid about it anymore. I secretly hired a professional wedding coordinator, Emma, someone with stellar reviews and experience dealing with difficult family members. I told David the coordinator was a surprise gift from my maid of honor, Sarah, who was worried about me being stressed and wanted to make sure everything went smoothly. Emma was a godsend. She immediately set up password protections with all vendors and established herself as the only authorized point of contact besides me. Away, and start making unauthorized changes. We'll make sure it doesn't happen again. But Karen wasn't done. 3 days before the wedding, she struck again with her biggest and most audacious sabotage attempt yet. She somehow bypassed Emma's protections and called the venue directly, claiming to be my mother and saying we needed to move the entire ceremony inside because I was having severe anxiety attacks about the weather ruining everything. There wasn't a single cloud in the forecast. It was supposed to be a perfect 75-degree day with light breeze. When I called to reverse the change, the venue manager was confused and sympathetic. "Your mother was really concerned about you," she said gently. "She mentioned that you'd been having panic attacks all week about potential rain, even though the forecast looks perfect. She said you were too embarrassed to call yourself, but that you'd specifically asked her to handle it because you were having a breakdown." Karen had apparently spent 20 minutes on the phone with the venue manager, creating an elaborate story about my supposed mental health crisis. She'd mentioned fake therapy sessions, made up medication, and even claimed I'd been hospitalized for anxiety the previous month. The venue manager was ready to recommend postponing the entire wedding. That's when I discovered something incredibly interesting and infuriating. While investigating how Karen had gotten through to the venue, I found out she'd been telling everyone, vendors, family, friends, even complete strangers, that she was the real wedding planner behind my entire wedding. She'd been taking credit for every detail, every choice, every decision that I'd spent 6 months meticulously researching and organizing. Emma had discovered business cards during her own investigation, professional business cards. Karen Mitchell, premier wedding consultant, creating dream celebrations for over 20 years. She was literally using my wedding as her business portfolio, telling people she was a professional event planner. But it got worse. Karen had been showing these cards around town, at the grocery store, at her book club, at church. She'd been telling people that she'd started a wedding planning business and that my wedding was going to be her big debut as a professional planner. She'd even posted on Facebook about her new venture and how excited she was to showcase her talents. The night before my wedding, I couldn't sleep. David was staying at his best man's house for the traditional separation, so I was alone in our apartment. Around midnight, I went downstairs for some water and heard Karen's voice coming from the living room. She was on the phone with someone, probably one of her church friends. "Yes, it's going to be absolutely gorgeous tomorrow," she was saying in her most prideful voice. "I planned every single detail myself, from the flowers to the music to the menu. The poor bride was so completely overwhelmed with everything. You know how these young girls get, that I basically had to take over the entire process. She just couldn't handle the pressure." I stood frozen in the hallway, listening to her take credit for months of my work, while simultaneously painting me as incompetent. "Oh, and I'm thinking of making this into a real business," she continued excitedly. "I've gotten so many compliments on the events I've organized for the family over the years. This wedding will be absolutely perfect for my portfolio. I'm thinking of charging maybe $5,000 for full wedding planning services. That seems reasonable for someone with my experience." She spent another 10 minutes detailing all the challenges she'd had to overcome because of my supposed incompetence and how she'd saved the wedding with her expertise. I'd had enough of her lies, manipulation, and credit stealing. This wasn't just about wedding sabotage anymore. This was about her building a fraudulent business on my work. I spent that entire night preparing my revenge. I documented every sabotage attempt, every lie, every manipulation. I gathered screenshots of her Facebook posts about her business, photos of her business cards, and recordings of her phone conversations. By morning, I was ready to completely destroy her fake reputation. First, I called every single vendor and explained the real situation. I had Emma conference in to verify my identity and authority. I showed them documentation of every change Karen had made, every lie she'd told, every time she'd impersonated me or claimed to be the wedding planner. The florist was absolutely horrified. She said she was your official wedding planner and that you were too anxious to make your own decisions. She knew so many details about your order that we had no reason to doubt her. We're so sorry. The caterer was furious. She spent an hour on the phone with us talking about your supposed dietary restrictions and even mentioned fake medical conditions. We completely restructured our prep based on her lies. The DJ was embarrassed. She seemed so knowledgeable about music and weddings. She told us she'd been planning events for 20 years and that you'd hired her because you were too overwhelmed to handle it yourself. I asked each vendor to play along with my plan for exposing her the next day. They were all eager to help after learning how they'd been manipulated and lied to. Then I created a group chat with David's 3 sisters, his brother, and his 2 best friends. I sent them screenshots of Karen's business cards, audio recordings of her phone calls taking full credit for my wedding planning, and copies of her Facebook posts about her new business venture. The response was immediate and explosive. His sister, Michelle, responded within minutes. "Oh my God, she did the exact same thing with my baby shower last year. She told everyone she planned the whole thing and even charged my neighbor $200 for planning advice that consisted of forwarding Pinterest links." His sister, Sarah, chimed in. "She's been using photos from my wedding on her Facebook for 2 years, claiming she was the planner. She even created fake testimonials from people saying how amazing her work was. I thought it was weird, but didn't want to cause family drama." His brother Mike added, "She charged my girlfriend's mom $300 for event coordination for their 25th anniversary party. Mom literally just showed up the day of, took some photos, and acted like she'd organized everything." His oldest sister, Amanda, who rarely got involved in family drama, sent a long message. "This explains so much. She's been telling people at work that she has a side business planning events. She even tried to get my boss to hire her for the company Christmas party. I was mortified because I knew she had no experience. Turns out Karen had been pulling this elaborate scam for years, taking credit for other people's events, using their photos as her portfolio, even charging her friends and neighbors for planning services that consisted entirely of stealing other people's ideas and claiming them as her own work." The family group chat exploded with more revelations. David's cousin mentioned that Karen had charged her neighbor for decorating advice and then just copied ideas from Pinterest. His aunt revealed that Karen had been taking credit for family reunion planning that the aunt had actually done. Even David's father chimed in, admitting he'd been suspicious when Karen suddenly started talking about having a business. I spent hours that night coordinating with Emma and the family to plan the perfect exposure. We set up multiple cameras, arranged for key family members to be present, and even contacted some of the people Karen had scammed to see if they wanted to be involved. The morning of my wedding, I put my carefully orchestrated plan into action. I arrived early to the venue with Emma. The venue was a beautiful garden space that I'd chosen specifically for its outdoor ceremony area and an elegant reception hall. Karen was already there at 7 a.m., wearing a dress that was way too formal and attention-grabbing for a mother of the groom, clearly trying to upstage me on my own wedding day. She was directing vendors around like she owned the place, acting like she was the professional in charge of everything. I watched her instruct the florists on placement, tell the caterers where to set up, and even attempt to give the photographer directions about angles and lighting. "Karen," I called out sweetly as I approached her, my phone already recording discreetly. "Could you come here for a moment? I want to talk to you about something important." She strutted over confidently, beaming with self-satisfaction. "Everything looks absolutely perfect, doesn't it, dear? I'm so glad you finally let me take proper control of the planning. I knew it would all come together beautifully once someone with real experience took over the situation. Actually," I said, pulling out my phone with a practiced smile, "I wanted to thank you publicly for all your help with my wedding planning. I thought everyone should know exactly what you've done." I opened the live stream I'd set up the night before, connected to my Instagram, Facebook, and the private group chat with David's family. Within seconds, 50 people were watching, and notifications showed the number climbing rapidly. "Everyone, I want you to meet Karen, David's mother," I announced cheerfully to the camera, making sure to get her full face in the frame. "She's been such a huge help with my wedding planning process over the past few months." Karen preened and primped for the camera, adjusting her hair and putting on her biggest smile. She was clearly thrilled to be on camera, not realizing what was about to hit her. In fact, she's been so incredibly helpful that she actually started her own professional wedding planning business using my wedding as her portfolio piece. Isn't that right, Karen? Her face went from glowing pride to confused concern in about 3 seconds. I pulled out her business cards and held them up to the camera. Karen Mitchell, premier wedding consultant, creating dream celebrations for over 20 years. She's been telling everyone that she planned my entire wedding from start to finish. I was just trying to help," Karen stammered, finally realizing something was wrong but not understanding the full scope yet. "Oh, but you did so much more than just help," I continued with fake enthusiasm, making sure the camera captured her growing panic. "You sabotaged my vendors, changed my orders without permission, and took credit for months of my hard work. You even tried to move my outdoor ceremony inside yesterday because you told them I was having mental health breakdowns about weather." I gestured to Emma, my actual wedding coordinator, who stepped into frame with a thick folder. "Everyone meet Emma, my real wedding planner. She's been documenting every single change Karen made behind my back." Emma opened the folder professionally. 14 unauthorized vendor changes, 12 false claims of being the official wedding planner, multiple instances of impersonating the bride, and extensive identity theft by using someone else's wedding as your business portfolio. The live stream comments were absolutely exploding. David's family members were typing furiously in the chat. His aunt wrote, "Karen, you told me you planned Jennifer's wedding completely and Rebecca's baby shower. You charged my friend money for that," added his cousin. His sister Michelle had joined the live stream and was commenting in real time. "She's been scamming people for years. I have proof." Karen tried to grab my phone out of my hands. "Turn that off right now. This is completely inappropriate. You're ruining everything." "Actually, no," I said, stepping back smoothly while Emma moved to block Karen's approach. "See, everyone? Karen has been running an elaborate scam for years, taking credit for other people's events, using their photos without permission, and charging friends and family members for planning services she never actually provided." I nodded to Emma, who began posting screenshots in the group chat faster than Karen could keep up. Bank records showing Karen had charged her neighbor $500 to plan her daughter's graduation party, an event the neighbor had actually planned entirely herself. Photos from David's sister's wedding that Karen had been using on social media as examples of her work, even fake testimonials she'd written for herself under different names. "The best part," I continued to the rapidly growing audience, now over 150 viewers, "is that Karen told everyone I was too overwhelmed and anxious to plan my own wedding, that I was having constant breakdowns and needed her to take over because I was too incompetent to handle it myself." Karen's face went from pale to bright red with embarrassment and rage. "Stop this right now, you ungrateful little... I don't deserve this." "Careful, Karen." David's voice came from behind her. He'd been watching the live stream from the groom's suite and had come running with his groomsmen. "You're on camera and about 200 people are watching you right now." He walked over and put his arm protectively around me, his face grim with disappointment. "Mom, is everything Jessica's saying true? Have you been lying about planning her wedding?" Karen looked around desperately. Vendors were openly staring and whispering. Wedding guests who'd arrived early were pulling out their phones to record. The photographer I'd hired was discreetly capturing everything for posterity. Even some of David's groomsmen were filming with their phones. "It's not what it looks like," she said weakly, her voice barely a whisper. "I was just trying to help make everything perfect for you both. I never meant for it to get this complicated." "Really?" I asked with mock concern, turning back to the camera. "Because I have audio recordings of you telling people you planned every detail of my wedding. I have documentation of every single sabotage attempt, and I have testimony from your own family members about all the other events you've stolen credit for over the years." David's sister, Michelle, had actually driven over during the live stream with her husband and 2 other family members. She marched up with her phone in hand, absolutely furious. "Mom, you charged my friend Jessica $300 to coordinate her anniversary party. Jessica planned that entire party herself. You literally just showed up, took pictures, and acted like you'd organized everything. And you've been using photos from my wedding on your Facebook for 2 years, Sarah added, arriving with her husband and teenage kids in tow, telling people you were the professional planner who designed everything. My friends have been asking me for your contact information. She charged my neighbor's mom for party planning advice, Mike chimed in. All she did was forward Pinterest links and show up to take photos. The crowd was growing by the minute. David's extended family, my family members who'd arrived early, even some of our friends were gathering around to watch the confrontation. Karen looked around at the circle of her own family members, all holding phones with evidence of her years of scams and lies. I just wanted to help, she whispered pathetically, tears starting to form. I just wanted to be useful and appreciated. No, I said firmly, looking directly into the camera while addressing her. You wanted attention and credit for other people's hard work. You wanted to feel important by stealing their accomplishments and charging money for services you never provided. You wanted to build a business on lies and other people's creativity. I turned back to address my live stream audience directly, which had grown to over 300 viewers. So, just to be absolutely clear, everyone, Karen Mitchell is not a wedding planner. She's not an event coordinator. She has no training, no experience, and no qualifications. She's someone who lies about other people's work and tries to profit from their efforts while sabotaging them behind their backs. The comments were pouring in faster than I could read them. People were tagging their friends, sharing the stream, and even local business owners were chiming in to warn others. Someone had identified her business cards and was posting warnings in local Facebook groups. And now, I announced with a bright smile, Karen is going to sit quietly in the very back row while I marry her son. If she causes any disruption whatsoever, security will escort her out of the venue immediately. I gestured to the 2 professional security guards I'd hired specifically for this possibility. They stepped forward and nodded at Karen. Karen opened her mouth to protest, but David cut her off sharply. Mom, sit down. Don't say another word. We'll discuss this after the honeymoon, but right now, you need to be quiet and let Jessica have her day. You've done enough damage. David's father had arrived and was staring at his wife in shock and disappointment. Karen, how could you do this? How could you lie to all these people? She had absolutely no choice. With the entire family watching and recording, dozens of strangers witnessing her humiliation, and security guards ready to remove her, she shuffled to the back row and sat in complete silence. The wedding proceeded absolutely perfectly. Every detail I'd planned and agonized over for months went off without a single hitch. The flowers were the exact blush pink I'd chosen. The menu included all our favorite dishes. The DJ played our carefully curated playlist, including our first dance song and all the meaningful tracks we'd selected together. David and I exchanged the vows we'd written ourselves, promising to support each other's dreams and always be honest with each other. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. During the reception, I made one final announcement that I'd been planning all week. I want to thank everyone who helped make this day absolutely perfect, I said into the microphone, my voice carrying across the beautifully decorated reception hall. My real wedding planner, Emma, who saved the day multiple times and protected my vision. My amazing vendors, who dealt with someone pretending to be in charge with such professionalism and grace, and my new family, who supported me completely when they learned the truth about what had been happening. I paused and looked directly at Karen, sitting alone at the family table while everyone else mingled and celebrated. Marriage is about trust, honesty, respect, and supporting each other's dreams and accomplishments. I'm grateful to be joining a family that truly values those things, even when it means confronting difficult truths. The applause was absolutely thunderous. Even Karen's husband, David's father, was clapping enthusiastically while staring at his wife with disappointment. 3 days into our honeymoon in Italy, David's phone started exploding with messages and notifications. The live stream had been shared hundreds of times across social media platforms. Karen's fake business was being exposed in local Facebook groups, neighborhood watch forums, and even some regional news outlets. Her church friends were asking for refunds for services she'd never provided. Multiple neighbors she'd scammed were threatening small claims court. The local Better Business Bureau had received several complaints. The story had even been picked up by some local news outlets as an example of wedding vendor fraud and family deception. "I actually feel a little bad for her," David said, scrolling through the messages and news articles while we sat on our hotel balcony overlooking the Mediterranean. "This is pretty humiliating, and it's going to follow her for a long time." "I don't feel bad at all," I replied honestly, sipping my wine and watching the sunset. She spent months systematically trying to ruin our wedding for her own ego and profit. She stole credit for my work, lied to vendors, and charged people money for services she never provided. She built a fake business on other people's creativity and hard work. Actions have consequences, and she earned every bit of this humiliation. David nodded slowly. "You're right. I guess I just never realized how extensive the lying had become. Mom's always been difficult, but this was way beyond normal family drama." When we returned from our honeymoon 2 weeks later, Karen had completely retreated from all social media. Her Facebook account was deactivated, her fake business cards were gone, she'd stopped attending social events where she might face questions about her supposed planning services. Several of David's relatives mentioned that she'd been unusually quiet at family gatherings, barely speaking unless directly addressed. His aunt told us that Karen had tried to attend their church group meeting, but left early when people started asking uncomfortable questions about her business. David's father pulled me aside privately at our first family dinner back home. "Thank you for exposing her," he said quietly, looking genuinely relieved, but also embarrassed. "I knew she was taking credit for things that weren't hers, but I had no idea how extensive the lying and scamming had become. She needed to be stopped before she really hurt someone financially or destroyed more relationships." He admitted that he'd been getting suspicious when Karen suddenly started talking about having a business, but could never provide specifics about her training or experience. "She kept saying she'd learned everything from planning family events, but I knew the family events were always planned by other people." 6 months later, Karen finally worked up the courage to attempt an apology. Sort of. "I may have gotten a little carried away with trying to help," she said stiffly during a tense family dinner, unable to make eye contact with me. "But I really was trying to make everything perfect for you and David. I wanted your wedding to be special." "Karen," I said calmly, setting down my fork and looking directly at her. "You systematically sabotaged my wedding vendors and lied to my face for months while stealing credit for my work. You impersonated me to vendors, changed orders without permission, and created elaborate lies about my mental health. You charged people money for services you never provided and built a fake business using other people's creativity. That's not helping or getting carried away. That's fraud and sabotage." She never admitted the full truth or gave a real apology, but she also never tried to take credit for anyone else's work again. Now, whenever family members plan events, they specifically and explicitly ask Karen not to help in any way. She sits quietly at celebrations, no longer trying to direct vendors or control any aspect of the planning. The family has instituted a no Karen involvement policy for all events. Last month, David's youngest sister got engaged, and the family was buzzing with excitement about wedding planning. At the engagement party, someone jokingly asked Karen if she'd be planning this wedding too. The entire room went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Even conversations at other tables stopped. Karen looked directly at me across the room, then slowly shook her head. "No," she said quietly, her voice barely audible. "I think she can handle it perfectly well herself. I'm sure it will be beautiful." It was the closest thing to an acknowledgement of wrongdoing I'd ever get from her. David and I have been married 2 years now. Our wedding photos, the real ones, planned entirely by me and executed by my actual vendors, hang prominently in our living room. Sometimes when Karen visits, I catch her staring at them with what might be regret. I think she finally understands that the most beautiful celebrations come from genuine love, hard work, and honest effort, not from stolen credit and fake credentials. But I'll never forget the look of complete shock and humiliation on her face when her elaborate house of lies came crashing down in front of everyone she'd been trying to impress. The live stream video still gets views occasionally, and people in our town still recognize Karen as that woman who tried to steal credit for her daughter-in-law's wedding. Her reputation never fully recovered, and she's essentially given up any pretense of being involved in event planning. Some lessons can only be learned the hard way, and Karen learned hers in the most public way possible. But more importantly, I learned that sometimes you have to fight back against people who try to steal your accomplishments and take credit for your hard work. The wedding was everything I dreamed it would be, not because of Karen's interference, but in spite of it. And our marriage has been stronger because we started it with honesty and by standing up for what was right. Sometimes the best revenge really is just telling the truth.